Welcome to the WIN Coalition's What's Next Speaker Series, where we bring together thought leaders, innovators, and experts to explore the future of education and beyond. Our conversations are designed to inspire new ideas, spark curiosity, and provide practical insights for educators, students, and lifelong learners alike. Thank you for joining us today on this journey into what's next. Now, let's dive into today's discussion.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our fourth episode of our WIN Speaker Series podcast, sponsored in whole by the WIN Coalition. Sorry, my computer got a little weird there. Sponsored by the WIN Coalition. We are a community of practice here at Yavapai College where we keep our eyes on what is next in our college, in our communities, and in our world. I'm Robyn Bryce, Special Programs Manager here at Yavapai College, and joining me today as co-host is my friend, Dr. Richard Pierce. He's a real utility player at the college. IT Relationship Manager is his official job title, but he's a researcher, ed techer, instructional designer, and as I said, most importantly, my friend. And we are very excited to be joined today by Dr. Milton Cox, Milt, as we're going to call him, rock star that you are. Milt is a prominent figure at Miami University, known as a public Ivy. I think that's a pretty interesting thing to note. He's the founder of the Center for Enhancement on on Learning and Teaching at Miami University. He's initiated and directed the original Lilly Conference on Conference and Teaching, now in its 44th year, I believe. Founded and is editor-in-chief emeritus of the Journal on Excellence in College and Teaching. He's led state and federal grants to establish faculty learning communities, FLCs, a big part of our conversation today. He's the co-editor of the book, Building Faculty Learning Communities. He's consulted in over 100 institutions. He is often coined as the person who came up with the phrase faculty learning and communities and that idea, which is really exciting. He's just dedicated his career to bringing people together to learn, to grow, and to create lasting change in education. And his passion for building strong learning communities has influenced institutions around the world. We're super excited to hear his thoughts today and have him on our show. Thank you, everyone, for making the time to be here today. Welcome to the WIN Coalition Speaker Series. Now let's dive into it. Hey. Milt, thank you so much for being here today. I want to start us off with one question, which is, as I said, you are recognized as the pioneer of FLCs, faculty learning communities. Can you take us back to some of those origins of that concept? What inspired you to develop FLCs and how have they evolved over the years that you've been involved with them?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. It all goes back to my early years as a mathematics professor when in our department at Miami, we had many majors and we needed to build a community among the students who were majors. And there was a wonderful institution, Pi Mu Epsilon, which is the National Math Honorary, which permitted actually funded students to attend the national summer math meetings if they presented papers. So we really introduced that idea into our chapter at Miami and enabled that to happen. And to do that, we did some really community building things like taking the train to the national meetings, having pizza at meetings. And so when the Lilly Endowment then invited Miami to apply for a grant to enhance early career faculty with respect to teaching and learning, they invited me to direct that particular program based on my experiences in mathematics as Director of Undergraduate Studies and that sorts of things. And so in doing that at Miami with early career faculty, the first thing that we thought that we should do is build community among these early faculty. They were in there as members of the small communities, which at that time we called Lilly Teaching Scholars, we wanted to build that community. So I took a lot of the things that worked with building community with students to use those with my colleagues, with my new colleagues. And so we featured having meals during meetings, perhaps at lunch, and actually taking a train to the National Faculty Development. Well, actually, it was the American Association for Higher Education. So this community building was very important, but also very important that we inherited from the Lilly Endowment is that it was important to have a scholarly part of this development for our early career faculty. And so they, as part of the program, had to come up with a teaching and learning project, something new that they said, we'd like to adopt this, but we haven't had much experience with it. And it differed across disciplines. Now, these new colleagues came in and they were across disciplines. So one might think, well, that would be pretty challenging to get them talking together, but it turned out it wasn't. Actually, on the very first meeting, when we went around and said what sorts of plans we had for the year, what outcomes we'd like to see, that very first meeting built that community. So it was very easy to do. And the way we planned it was that in the first semester, this was a year-long program, in the first semester, they planned their project. So they were, for example, they might say, I want to introduce problem-based learning into my class. And so here's my plan. Here's how I'm going to do it. And then other scholars in the group would have, somebody might have case studies. Someone else might say, well, I want to get cooperative learning going. So they all had their project, but they were all working together on them when we would meet, along with having seminars about teaching and learning. And so they also planned how they were going to assess the change in student learning that they saw in their students. Now, this was the scholarship of teaching part, but this was back in the 80s before Boyer came out with his new concept of the scholarship of pedagogy. So we were pioneering our way in that direction. And in the second semester of this learning community, they would actually be attempting their projects in their courses, and they were sharing their progress, where they got stuck. And we planned then at the end of the year, they would do a presentation to the campus, call it a symposium, and they would talk about the student learning, how it changed, and how they may have changed. And of course, very importantly, we built in an assessment that we could use to report on our progress to our administrators and to faculty. That was a very important key right from the beginning. So the Lilly conferences, then what happened after the Lilly endowment? It was a 3-year grant. When that expired, our colleagues in these, which became later faculty learning communities, they wanted a place to share their work, and some of the other universities in the Lilly grants, they also like the idea of getting together and share. So Lilly conferences were born. We invited colleagues from other institutions to come and share their teaching and learning projects, what they learned. And so that was really our beginning of Scholarship of Teaching and Learning through the Lilly Conference. And then in 1990, actually, Boyer gave a keynote at the Lilly Conference on the new scholarship. And so at that point, we started our Journal on Excellence in College Teaching that gave our colleagues a chance now to publish their work in addition to presenting that. So that, in a nutshell, describes how we got started, but it really started with working with students, finding out what built community with them, and discovering the same thing happened for early career faculty. And so that's kind of the start of it all.
I love this. You've touched on so many points in what you've just said, breaking down silos, being vulnerable with each other, creating safe spaces for us to share and talk about our successes as well as our failures. This cross-departmental collaboration. We brought you here. I mean, honestly, it's pretty selfish why we're so excited to have you. We, the WIN Coalition, consider ourselves a community of practice. And I would say that we got together starting last year at our AFIC conference, the Alliance for in Innovation and Transformation. And so we kind of, our WIN Coalition, the What Is Next Coalition, came out of that. And like I said, we consider ourselves a community of practice. And in our charter, one of the things that we talked about is that we wanted to have this structure where we have these groups and that they're talking, and at the end of the school year, we would have these deliverables. We haven't, I loved when you're talking about the planning and the first year is or the first semester is kind of thinking about it, and the second semester is kind of the execution of it. We bring in WIN speaker series like you. We have our Zoom channel that we have a lot of people talking, but it's the deliverables that I think are interesting in this. And I'd love to hear more about what are some expected or deliverables that you would think these are some good ideas, or this is the way that you should go about creating the structure to have these concrete things at the end. It's great that we're having these conversations internally. We're all very inspired, and we can see so many things on the horizon. And much like you've spoken about, we all have these different interests. But how do we come together? How do institutions, not just ours, but what advice do you have for institutions to come together to focus on those deliverables that we can assess and find out if they are being successful in working within our institutions?
Well, one thing, several things. First, we have found that in a faculty learning community, which is different than a community of practice, is that people arrive in the faculty learning community they actually fill out an application to be in the community. And in that, they indicate their commitment to the particular project that community is focusing on. And their department chair signs off on that, so that the department is behind this particular effort. And another thing that does, it provides safety for the individuals, because if in their quest for tenure or promotion, if in that particular stage, the department chair will often say, I want my colleague who's applying here really needs to work on the research agenda if they're going to get tenure. And so maybe next year or the year after would be that. So the people who arrive are committed to that deliverable. That's an important thing. And I think that commitment continues throughout the year. So they're not communities of practice. There's a core group, and then there are various layers of colleagues who are participating, out to those who might just be lurkers, interested, drop in when the topic is of real interest and back. But we have found that to actually get that deliverable completed, you need a structure. And Etienne Winger, who introduced the concept of communities of practice, he's very much on an organic nature for the communities of practice. People can drop in and drop out, um, and their level of interest could change. But in a faculty learning community, people are they are really focused on that deliverable. And one thing that we've worked is at the very beginning of the faculty learning community, the group sets a date as to when they are going to deliver that project. It might be a presentation to the to the campus. It might be a white paper. It might be a analysis surveys of certain areas in the university, but they are focused on that. So as the year unfolds, they are looking at a sort of a timeline as to when they can get that done. Now, another thing important to that deliverable, of course, is the facilitator of a faculty learning community or co-facilitators. And so that's a little bit different than the ordinary type communities of practice where you have different colleagues in there with different roles, but it's not a structured, like, for example, for FLCs, we have recommendations, our structure about 16 different recommendations. And there would not be that particular part in a community's practice because it's an ebb and flow of interest that can change. And that's all good because there are many kinds of situations when that's how you want to progress. But for FLCs, it turned out to be very focused for that deliverable. And as a result, our administration, provost deans, they uh, they they valued that end product. Um, so we I think those are some of the keys to getting that productivity. And so I look at faculty learning communities and communities of practice as you suggested. Communities of practice, a wide umbrella, and faculty learning communities are just sort of like at one very structured end of that. So I guess my advice to your communities of practice would be to try to structure it somewhat as much as the group would like to do. Explore with the group. They really decide how it's going to work, both in faculty learning communities and in communities of practice. So I suggest you work with them, find out how much structure they could be comfortable with, working toward a due date for that particular deliverable, and having perhaps some person identified as a facilitator in that group or groups who would sort of keep an eye on things and make sure that you're moving forward. My colleague Jackie McDonald in Australia. Now in the Commonwealth countries, communities of practice, that's what their faculty learning communities are called, because a faculty means a different thing in the Commonwealth. It means a collection of faculty. So they use the term communities of practice even when it's a faculty learning community. But her traditional communities of practice in Australia were just, she felt that they weren't getting things done. It was just too loose. And so she read about faculty learning communities. She came to Miami, presented at the Lilly Conference, and interviewed our facilitators and communities of practice, and went back and did this sort of mild conversion with their communities of practice that I suggested. And we wrote a chapter about it in her book that she edited on communities of practice in higher education. And we compared faculty learning communities and communities of practice. It's a nice chapter. And so if you're interested in this comparison and maybe slight conversion, that would be a good place to start.
It sounds like there's some similarities, like that people working together, people sharing that community involvement, where we're all a part of something. Both the community of practice and the faculty learning communities have that similar kind of vibe, but where they seem to differ is in the structure and the accountability between the two, where faculty learning, like where we said, like communities of practice is more like what we're doing, just kind of talking about ideas, sharing articles. Hey, check out this tool. These kind
That's
of things,
good.
where the
Right.
faculty learning communities are more like, hey, we have a plan and we're going to execute and we're holding ourselves accountable to this plan that we have that we think is going to work. Fail or succeed, this is where, good or bad turnout based on the assessment, there's this accountability and structure that goes in with it. But you
And
had,
we're going to have fun doing it as
yes.
well. That's an important part that I think was missing from in Australia from their communities of practice. It was all not work, but it was all structured, and there was not building community was not part of the community of practice, and that's often the case with the communities of practice. But in the States with FLCs, that is, of course, one of the goals of an FLC is to build community, and it happens very easily and very quickly.
Speaking of building communities, you had mentioned about administration and administrators. How important are the administration in helping build, facilitate, move forward those communities of practices or those faculty learning communities for their involvement in these efforts?
Well, if you have them on board, that's excellent. Now, of course, when we started them, they were grassroots. So it takes a core of faculty, just like the core in the communities of practice. It takes a core to get them started on a campus. We sort of have 6 degrees of leadership. One is the on campus. That one is the investigator who wants to go investigate FLCs, perhaps visit another place, go to Lilly Conference where we have a session on faculty learning communities. So that's the investigator. And then the implementer on campus then begins to set them up there. And so if it's grassroots, you don't have a teaching and learning center, then you're just going to be working with some colleagues. But today, teaching and learning centers are so commonplace that that's where they usually land. The implementation goes forward. And while I mentioned implementation, one really excellent thing that popped up about around 2009, late 1990s, was the idea of implementation science. And it originated with NIH and the medical field, where you had so much emphasis on evidence-based research and discovery, and very little on implementation of it. So it was their bench to bedside excellent concept, where the doctors, the research occurred at the bench, and then the idea was to get that implemented so that the doctors could use that with their clients at the bedside. but people were only spending, I mean, the US government was spending 99% of its money on the research and 1% on its implementation. So we saw that as a great model for supposedly something comes along like problem-based learning, and you want to implement, share that with those who would like to implement that in classes on your campus. And so it was this, the idea of faculty learning communities. There were several implementation styles you could use. You could use workshops. You could have incentives like grants. You could have lots of media talking about problem-based learning. But what implementation science, what their research showed was that those methods were not effective. And after their research, they showed that really the only thing they found effective was programs that would that were over time allowing people to work together and getting to know each other and trust each other. That was the key to getting programs implemented. And that's what faculty learning communities do. And so looking at your community of practice concept, you want to have that idea of implementation if you have a deliverable you're looking for. So building in that community and getting people to know each other over time, which is, I think, more challenging in a community of practice, but that was the particular goal. So I think in working with administrators, and that, I think having your community of practice or your faculty learning communities over time and involving early career faculty is important. Now, we did a study of early career faculty who were in our early career faculty learning community over 15 years, the first 15 years, and we compared them and their acquiring tenure with those faculty at the universities who were in the same cohorts, entrance cohorts, but didn't participate in the faculty learning communities. And in our study, we showed that those who were in the faculty learning communities received tenure at a significantly higher rate. Now, we couldn't claim it was because they were in the FLC.
I'll give you credit.
The key thing we could say is it didn't harm them to be in the FLC. It didn't harm their research programs. They still were able to achieve this. So I think sharing results like that with administrators and also studies we did on the effect of being in an FLC with respect to change of the participants and change in the impact and their learning of their students. I think those results, those research results are a key in working with administrators and getting them to fund, adopt your program. Plus, you build up a legacy members who've been in your FLCs or communities of practice. We found that they went on to be department chairs, deans, even a provost. And when you have that strength with you, that strength of success, that is just invaluable.
Well, very cool. Yeah. Go ahead. What were you going to say? Go ahead.
No. I could go on, of course, forever.
Well, that's why we brought you. We want your expertise. We want you to go on forever. It definitely seems like there's a lot of results driven in these, FLCs, not only with the deliverables that we're doing, but also the potential that it has on the individual learner. So not only just at a at a institution-wide kind of changes in practice and things that we're implementing, perhaps in innovation, but also it seems like it has a solid benefit for the individual who participates in these learning communities, which that's super valuable, I think, for our people to know. Richard, I've been dominating the questions. I'm sure that you have a couple. You want me to give you a little bit of room to jump in here?
Yeah. So, Milt, how do you know that your faculty learning community is high functioning? What would be some characteristics of a robust FLC?
How do we know they are high functioning?
Well, how do you know when you're in one that it's a high functioning, or if it's, I'm sure there's different stages of life cycles of an FLC, but what would be characteristics to shoot for, I guess, is my question.
Yes, I'm trying to think of the name of a colleague who years ago, probably in the 60s and 70s, who investigated the phases of group development. And he found that in the early stages, the forming stages, people come in and they're very enthusiastic. They're getting to know each other. But then they hit the storming stage. This is the old forming, storming, norming. And so when they hit the storming stage, it's really not that they're really in a becalmed stage, as if you were out on a sailboat, where they just they feel they're not getting anywhere. We're not making progress. And so the next stage was the norming stage. And so in a small group, in a faculty learning community, what our facilitators find is very helpful there is to focus on what we have achieved and look at the deliverable and that endpoint date. And the norming stage, when you decide how are we going to get there, look what we have done and what we can do. And so from that stage, you move to the performing stage, where now things start rolling and it's almost like you're on a track. And to get things done and work toward the adjourning stage, where where you be sure to build in that deliverable, that a celebration at the end. Provost comes to your session, comes to your symposium if you have several FLCs where they're all presenting. So the key is commitment as you're going along. And so the way the facilitators they monitor that, they're aware of what can happen. And so maybe that answers your question, but I think it goes in that direction.
So we're an open enrollment community college, and we do not have a Center for Teaching and Learning. So I would describe our current situation. We're probably 7 months into our community of practice, which is really a community of principle at this point, right? Because we haven't gotten our practice together. But I would describe it as a faculty staff learning community, because staff do a lot of the work, right?
Yes.
In terms of supporting academic programs, and so it's a faculty staff learning community, and I can see that structure would overlay nicely with faculty promotion and tenure efforts, as well as staff, retention and development plans. So I really appreciate your insight.
Well, I think that I know faculty learning communities have been successful in community colleges, and one of my colleagues wrote about that. I can get you that reference if you're interested.
Please.
And I think that in a way, there's more opportunity because often there's not a pressure to produce research, but the scholarship of teaching and learning is the kind of research that community college administrators, that's what they're looking for. And I can recall it was a community college in Queens, I think. And what they did, the plan that they had there was very effective. They had, I think, 2 hours once a week where there are no classes, but people could work together there. Now that was before the virtual opportunities, but they would meet once a week, their community of practice, and they would have a certain project they were working on, and they would do all their work there. They would not have any homework, nothing to take away. And with that particular model, it was very effective that they were able to complete their challenges and and not take away from the so many other opportunities that they were working on with their classrooms and family life and that sort of thing. So it's I think it's a really wonderful opportunity, and the scholarship of teaching aspect. Um, we've got a cycle that we recommend that people go through, and we've found that even our early career faculty who arrive on campus and have had no experience with the scholarship of teaching and learning, many not in the social sciences, but we advocate 7 steps toward producing a project leading toward a publication that you could accomplish in 1 year. So it's actually a faculty learning community on the scholarship of teaching and learning. And they develop these and then present them the next year at a community of practice. And it's been very effective for faculty in many different disciplines that are not social sciences, and the STEM disciplines, and so it's a real learning experience for colleagues to go through that. Okay, on to your next question.
No, please. This is great. I can appreciate, the idea of doing the task when we have assembled that time. My calendar is so full with so many things that if I don't send that email that we talked about sending in that, meeting, if I don't do those things, oftentimes trying to find the time outside of there, it's, things can fall to the wayside. So I appreciate that kind of idea that, like, while we're together, that's when the work gets done. I think that's a good way to look at it. As we're trying to do work and move things forward.
Are you virtual or are you face to face?
We have both. We have both in person and online classes.
Well, I meant for your communities of practice.
Oh, right now we are virtual. Right now we meet in like online spaces. We'll hold Zoom meetings. We'll, again, like I said, we'll take this video and we'll share it with everyone and kind of have a Q&A. We have a Zoom chat channel going on where people share. We have not, other than that AFID conference where some of us were initially there, it was like a different task. It was all about innovation and transformation, but we don't normally meet in person. We are a virtual community at this moment.
Well, now that you've indicated that, I have to confess that with respect to faculty learning communities, virtual is very challenging. That building community virtually, I even had a colleague who applied for an NSF grant to have a virtual STEM meeting and to send all the people around on the different campuses who couldn't meet face to face, send them pizza. have it delivered before the meeting, and that's but it's just so hard to do. So one positive thing I think about communities of practice is there's been some research done on effective communities of practice, and I can send you Marianne Dickey. She wrote about a virtual community of practice, and we published it in our journal. That was successful, and it didn't involve building communities. It was all based on a workplace involvement of people getting to know each other and working in a virtual workplace using architectural wayfinding. And so they built a website and structure that was very successful. So I think there's more success moving ahead virtually with respect to communities of practice than with respect to faculty learning communities. It's more challenging with the FLCs and not having that face-to-face, having pizza together connection.
We'll have to send pizza emojis to each other.
Well, yeah, I had hope for, I think it was called Second Life. There was a period where you could have avatars and actually meet and share food together virtually. And we kind of hoped that might take over, but it didn't last very long.
Well, it's interesting that you say that. We at Yavapai College have invested heavily in immersive learning. It's part of my job as special programs manager. I often say I get to bring the nerdery. So immersive learning, AI, emerging tech, emerging trends. This is what I get to bring about, discuss, and kind of hopefully move the college forward in these different ways. But we have invested in virtual platforms like Engage, where we could meet virtually. Some people could be in a headset. Some people could even just meet on their 2D environment, but still, on their computers, but still be in there. And we even have some exciting things in the future as we're building our Center for Learning and Innovation on the Prescott campus, where we're going to have innovative and immersive spaces where people can meet and share, portals where people on our different campuses can look like they're standing right next to each other. So I think that as technology continues to evolve, especially some of the things that we're looking at and things that we don't even know that's been in evolution yet or developed yet, I think that there might be some opportunities for us to continue not only our community of practice, but maybe work with you, Milt, on finding new ways that we can have faculty learning communities and this involvement, in maybe some of these virtual spaces where we're truly seeming like we're right there bonding and building these communities towards goals and deliverables.
This is a great area for research. We've really encouraged that for our journal, and we go out to various conferences and encourage research on that development of, just as you're doing, you're trying different things. How effective are they? So try to measure how that impacts the various parts that we look at with respect to faculty learning communities. What about communities of practice? What is improving that impact, that building of community, if you want to include that? I think these are all key things, and we have called for research articles on that, and we're just not getting them. Now, this might be a moment that I could put in my second big call for research, and that is, okay, for communities of practice, originally, Etienne Winger, in fact, still, his focus is on business, industry, government, those particular areas, not higher education, never has been. And so it's gradually filtered into higher education, with us in higher education trying to revamp, remodel, and okay, so that's going. Jackie's book, I mentioned actually 2 books now on building communities of practice in higher education, but it's all at the administrative level, faculty, administrative. What's big thing is missing is the classroom. Communities of practice in the classroom, lots of challenges there. So systems convening, that part of use in the classroom, these are all. I gave a session at the International Society for Scholarship and Teaching and Learning this fall about, let's start research there. It's just not done, but it's challenging. But there's another big research area that I'd like to see work done in.
Well, this is why we bring Richard along. He is our research guru. He's anytime I talk about doing something, he's like, "This sounds like a good research paper. This sounds like a good research project." So, Richard, you heard
so many
it.
opportunities. There's just so many opportunities, right? But
Yes.
you did hit the nail on the head about the challenges of people stepping out of kind of the my course silo to, a broader collective experience, and that's something that literally we're building from the ground up here. And this conversation has been very fruitful and given us some ideas on how to move forward. And thank you again for your participation.
Absolutely. Milt, I could sit here and talk to you forever, but we can't. We're kind of getting close to the end of this, but we do have a couple more questions that I want to throw out there. Before I come up with some of my last questions, is there anything else that you want to add? You've mentioned so many wonderful resources, so many wonderful books, authors, papers, things that we should be investigating. Is there anything else you want to share about resources, upcoming projects, or words of wisdom that you have for our community of practice, our people that are involved in this conversation here?
No, I'd say let's go with what you've got next.
All right. If someone wants to reach out to you, how could they get a hold of you? If they're interested in this conversation, they want to be a part of more of what you're doing or invite you on a future podcast, how can they get a hold of you?
Just send me an email, coxmd@miamioh.edu, and I'll be glad to have a session like this. I love to talk about it. Also, they're welcome to come. We have 5 Lilly Conferences each year. At each one, I do a roundtable. There's roundtable sections on faculty learning communities, and sometimes a session on a concurrent session on communities of practice. And at every one on developing a scholarship of teaching and learning, 7 steps. So there are lots of ways to get in touch, and I'm happy to work with anyone. This is a lifelong project.
Thank you. We appreciate that. And now on to the lightning round. Here's the fun part. Are you ready? Here's the questions.
Wow.
Oh yeah. What's the best piece of advice that you have ever received?
It was from my advisor as a senior at DePaul University. I started out as a physics major, struggled. Shifted to chemistry, liked it, but I was going to have to go an extra year. Went back to physics, struggled. Talked with Clint Gass, my original calculus teacher, first year, and he said, "Milt, listening to your stories, with in particular the idea of working with equipment, putting it together, your struggles there. How about math? You've been taking math courses, you've done well. You're not going to have to struggle with equipment there." That was before computers, of course. Oops, my age. And so that was the most helpful advice I ever got academically.
Thank you, Mr. Gass. We're very appreciative of the
Yes.
course that he set you on. What's one underrated skill that you believe every educator should have?
Building community.
Yeah, agree. And lastly, looking ahead, what gives you hope about the future of education?
Well, I think it's because sort of looking at pieces, I think the scholarship of teaching and learning, the progress it's making, it's slow. It's still I think it needs to be ranked equally with disciplinary research, and along with the scholarship of teaching and learning. Both are very valuable. That is a challenge, for centuries. departments have awarded tenure and merit based on disciplinary scholarship, which is excellent, wonderful. But I think on behalf of teaching and learning, that scholarship is very important and should rank right up there equally with the others.
Richard, you're definitely on the right track. You talk about SOTL all the time, so I love it. I'm sure it feels good to be affirmed, but you knew that. You knew that. Well, Milt, thank you so much for joining us today. This is a wrap on our episode of the WIN Coalition Speaker Series. I want to invite everyone, if you found what you heard here today inspirational, please make sure to check out our lineup of forward thinkers, educators, and innovators that are driving change. Head on over to our WIN Coalition Speaker Series YouTube channel on the Yavapai College YouTube channel, and definitely keep the momentum going. And until next time, please stay curious, think big, and keep winning.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the What's Next Speaker Series, brought to you by the Yavapai College WIN Coalition. We hope today's conversation has sparked new ideas and inspired you to think about the future of education in fresh and exciting ways. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to share it with your colleagues and community. Until next time, keep seeking signals, stay curious, and join us on the journey of discovering what's next.